Hi guys, it's Nancy, and I have another new stamp from Blue Knight Rubber Stamps. So this week I'm going to show you one of the ways that I made a card with it. So the first one I want to show you, we're not going to demonstrate this today, but this one is super easy. All I did here was I did first layer stamping, then I went over it with some pan pastels. So this is all pan pastels, yellows and oranges, some greens, some gray, browns, and then I mixed the browns there and some blue in the tent, and then I went back and stamped over it. I also added some birds. This is the Blue Knight Rubber Stamps Birds 2 set, and then these cute little deer that are hiding in the background there came out of Mama Bear and Friends. They're right here. So just by mixing and matching a couple stamps, this was really easy to do with the pan pastels, and then you just want to make sure you spray it with a sealant when you're done. So we're not going to do a video on that one, but I do want to do a video on this one, which is our evening camping scene. I really liked this little fire and thought, okay, how can I make it look different from my morning scene? So you can see same stamp set, but two completely different looks. Put in the comment down below which one you like better, if you like the night scene or if you like the morning scene. But we're going to do this one today. So what I have is some Bristol Smooth paper. This is cut down to 5 1/4 by 4. You can use any Bristol Smooth. Anytime I use distress inks, I like Bristol Smooth. And we're going to be playing around with some watercolor brush pens. I have a variety of different watercolor brush pens, and I just want to show you this paper really makes a difference. So any stamped image you have, it can blend beautifully. So I have my stamp mounted in the MISTI. You can see I have a little masking paper moon. It's been used a couple of times there. And my sticky grid is not so sticky. So let's switch that out real quick. And I've had this sticky grid in, I don't know, for probably 6 months or so. So here's how they sell it. It's the sticky grid sheets. This really makes a difference when you are stamping multiple times, because if your paper moves, you may not get as good. And I wonder if we turn this over, if that will work. Let's try that before I put a new piece in. But this really makes a difference when I'm doing double stamping. So when I'm doing with the Blue Knight Rubber Stamps, and I like to stamp and then color over them, and then stamp and color over them again, it helps that that paper doesn't move off of there. And I want my moon actually between my trees here. And that's just a little circle punch I cut out. Well, we'll deal with the moon later. All right, so just put your little masking there. Okay, now we're ready to go. So I am going to stamp with some archival ink. I'm using my Blue Knight Rubber Stamps little magnetic handle there. Makes it super easy, so I don't have to worry about dropping the ink pad. If some of you have arthritis and it's hard to hold on to some of these ink pads, it's super thin. There's not a big area to hold on to there. You can rest assured with this magnetic handle that it's not going to go anywhere. Now for this first inking, and I do the same technique whether I'm using distress inks or whether I'm using pan pastels. So I'll make my paper is all the way down in the left-hand corner there. And the first inking doesn't have to be great. That's just going to be our placement for the stamped image. So I know where to put our colors. And I'm using the archival ink instead of my VersaFine Clair ink because I'm going to be dragging this distress ink tool all over this. So I don't want that pigment ink to smear in the VersaFine Clair. So the archival ink is more permanent. Okay. So really good. Actually, that's perfect for our moon. I thought it was going to be in the way. Now, when I pull this out, I'm going to pull this whole plastic piece out and move my mini MISTI out of the way. And I have a couple of different colors of distress inks. I have Distress Inks Peel Paint. For those of you that don't know, this is just the paper that comes in with the MISTI, and I laminated mine. So it's laminated on both sides. And this will help me line everything back up later. So I have peeled paint, chipped sapphire, some dusty Concord, and of course some black. And then I have mini distress tools for each one in each color. And at this point, I'm just going to start with each color and start adding it. Now, if you are afraid of fingerprints, which does sometimes happen when you're using Bristol Smooth, take a piece of Scotch Post-it tape and just put that on your fingers. That'll give you something to hold on to. I'm going to slide these inks out of the way until I'm ready for them. Okay, so the first one I'm going to do is some peeled paint. And while leaving this taped onto my little laminate piece, I'm going to start filling in where the grass is. This also makes it super easy, not only to color in, but if you're going to do any kind of mass producing of cards, and you need to do a card quickly, this saves us some time. The Bristol paper makes it really smooth, so there isn't any kind of swirl marks from the Distress ink tools. This one is Chipped Sapphire, so I'm going to go in and do kind of around the trees and do the sky. Now I want to be careful around my mask here because this mask has been used a few times, so it already has some ink in there. So I just want to be conscious of that and try not to smear. Whoops, that happened. It's okay. It's losing its tackiness. And all that is a little bit of masking paper that I cut out with a circle punch. Now what's cool about this technique is you can do whatever colors you want. If you want this to be like a Northern Lights look, you could probably, you know, put some citrus green in there or some pink in there. I'm doing your traditional night sky, so I'm going to be doing some blues, some purples, and some black. So that one was Chipped Sapphire. Now I'm going to do some Dusty Concord, and I'm going to focus on the outer edge because I want it to look like the moonlight is kind of highlighting our campsite. And also we have that fire there, the campfire. So we want the center to be kind of lit up and everything else around it to be sort of dark. So just bringing in some color with the purple. Okay, and then last color is going to be Black Soot. And the Black Soot, I really am going to go around and do the entire edge of the photo. Even when there's no color, I'm going to use the black. Again, we want our focus, our eyes to be drawn towards the middle of our campsite scene. So everything else can have color to it. We just want it to be kind of darkened out. So we still see the green, but it's really dark now. And that's totally optional, but I think it helps to give that illusion of, you know, a night sky. Okay, so once I feel that's done, now the fun part is coloring everything in. I do like to wipe my glass mat off because when we're using watercolors, as you know, Distress inks reactivate with water. So we want to make sure we kind of keep that area clean. I have a little paper towel, a little water brush here. And all we're going to do now is color. It's really that simple. So I'm going to start with our fire here, which is a bright yellow. And I'm going to be using all kinds of watercolor markers. I have Zigs, I have Artezas. Use the supplies you have. You're not limited. There's no rule that says you can't use one brand with another. And I think a lot of times as crafters, when we store our things and we put them away, sometimes we feel when we're getting them out obligated to use one manufacturer, you know, within its means. Well, no, you guys are going to see me. I have all of my watercolor markers. These are the new ones, the Chalkola markers. I just reviewed these. And they work just as good as my Artezas and my Zigs. So I have no problem pulling them out and using them. is just a different variety of colors, you know, based on what you have in your stash. Now, if you only have one kind or one brand, don't feel guilty. That's okay. Like I said, I just like mixing mine up based on the colors that I do have. So that's a little bit darker brown. And here's a lighter brown. Now right now I'm really just using the markers themselves. I'll go from dark to light, and you'll see I'll overlap the light onto the dark and it will do the blending for me. Sometimes I will get the water brush out, but it's just really easy on this Bristol paper to get those colors to blend. Now, like for grays, I don't have a lot of grays. In fact, there's, I think, only one gray marker in that set. So now I'm going to grab my Arteza Real Brush pens. I do have an affiliate link for Arteza, so I will link that for you guys. Okay, so I feel like my rocks should be gray. Now I want darker gray. And I don't have a lot of the zig markers. I only have maybe a dozen of them, just a few, handful. The rest of my watercolor markers, I have the Sai Japanese ones. I have the Arteza ones, which are the ones I do use the most because I think you get a lot of value for the dollar with the Arteza ones. I have the Chalkola ones, which I just reviewed, which are really nice. I also have those Craftian ones, which I got last year. So I always mix and match my colors. You know, when I'm representing a brand, obviously I can only use that brand. But when I am shopping, I don't buy the same colors. I buy colors I don't have. So don't feel obligated because you have a certain brand that you have to stay with that brand. Get, you know, fill in the holes of the colors that you don't have. Okay, so now we kind of want to do this mountain in the background. I do want to make that a little darker back here. And so far, I haven't had to do very much blending because these are all very small areas. I will get into blending here shortly. Found these markers very difficult to use when I first got them, and everybody was using them, and I was like, I don't get what the appeal is of these watercolor brush pens. And then I realized it was the paper that I was using, and that once I switched my paper to this Bristol Smooth paper, and look how easily that water activates that color and allows for it to move. What a difference. And because it's markers, you guys, it's so easy to just color with markers. You're not drawing, we're coloring in stamped images. So all you're basically doing is coloring, adding a little water to blend those together to give you that watercolor look. And listen, not everything has to be watercolored. If you like the way that it looked before, you don't have to put water on it. Okay, now I did a yellow tent and I did a blue tent. Let's go with a bright red tent. Why not? Let's do 2 darker color reds here. All right, let's see here. This is called Wine Red. I do like the Arteza markers do have theirs named. And don't worry if you can't see some of the detail. Like I said, we are going to stamp over this, and that's going to bring that detail back out. So I want that very dark, but now I'm going to go in with my watercolor brush, and now I'm going to drag some of that color over to the front of the tent. What that's going to allow me to do is, number one, smooth out the color on the side of the tent, and number two, carry that color over to the front of the tent so that I am using the same color but don't have to worry about any kind of marker brush strokes. So now it looks like this part of the tent is darker because it's over in the back of the woods. This is a little lighter because the campfire is highlighting it. That's all I do is just pull from the side and move it to the front. Pull from the side, move it to the front. And see how easy that blends, and looks like I took a lot of time to make sure that those match. Okay, that was very easy. All right, our ground, I want our ground to be kind of a light dirt color. Like this area has been cleared out just for camping. These folks, found this little camping area in the woods. So it's nice and flat. It's already been cleared out. So you can see I left a lot of spaces there. I'm going to go back in with my watercolor brush and drag that color into the white spaces. Find that even though these are named watercolor brush markers, for me it's really hard to use them on watercolor paper. I love using Bristol paper. One, with smoothing out the distress inks, but two, when doing this watercoloring technique, the Bristol paper holds up, it doesn't pill, and then it also makes it so easy to blend everything. It looks like I watercolored this with fancy watercolor paints, but no, I used markers, colored them in just as my kid would, and then just used a watercolor brush to spread that color out. It's cheating. It's like watercolor cheating, okay? This is just black. I just want to put this in the center of the tent here. Again, I'm only going to do a little bit, and then I will use my water brush to spread that out. I don't want it to be too black that I lose the detail of what the artist drew in there. And I think all I have left are trees. So let's see. So I had a hard time with the trees the first time I did them because the green that I had originally picked was a super bright green, and I went over it with a darker green, but it just didn't look really well. So I made sure this time that I picked a nice dark woodsy green instead of a bright green. And again, all I'm doing is coloring it in. And I'll go in with the darker one, and anywhere that the artist has put in shadows by drawing them in, I just put my color in to follow that. I know back here on the ground it's going to be darker in the back of the tree versus the front of the tree. Now those trees in the background, I will go in with an even darker marker and do those in the background. And use a couple of different colors because, in nature, they're not all twins. They're all different colors, right? And when in doubt, swatch it out. That's a really dark one. We'll use that one for this tree back here. Let's do a little tree with that one. This would be really fun to do the Northern Lights with the, I like adding that citrus green color in the sky and then doing some purple around it. It really makes it pop. And I've said this before about Blue Night rubber stamps. They have such talented artists that make this look so easy, and all it takes is just a little bit of coloring, paying attention to the artist's clues on what's lighter or darker, where there should be highlights or shadows, and that's it. You don't need to be a really good artist. I do not consider myself an artist. I can color, because, that's not really that hard. I can figure out how to blend, but it's once you figure out the secret, it's like when you cook something, you have a really good recipe. A lot of people could take the same recipe, but someone might cook it better than someone else. It's once you figure out, the timing, the temperature, how to mix it. It's the same thing with these markers. I got to tell you, in the beginning, guys, I was really, really intimidated, and I threw the markers to the side, and especially the Zig markers, and I was like, what a waste of my time. These markers really are not meant for me. I don't know how everybody's getting such a good job coloring with them. I don't understand what the appeal is. And once I changed the paper to the Bristol paper, what a life changer. And so now I don't mind using these. And I was just thinking, well, they're watercolor markers. I have to use watercolor paper. I really don't use watercolor paper too often. I find the mixed media paper, the Bristol paper, works just fine. I'm just taking the water brush and mixing the colors together, and anywhere there's any light areas that I may have missed, just taking that and coloring over it. This will give it that watercolor look by spreading the ink out. You'll fill in any of the light areas. Anywhere you have brush strokes, it will eliminate those brush strokes. These trees came out way better than my first one because I used a much better color choice. And of course, you can always go in and do the background this way as well. You don't have to do the distress inks. I just like doing the distress inks because for me, it's quick, it's easy. I'm a little bit of a lazy crafter, so there we go. We're all done. So now we want to go in and add our second stamping. At this point, I'm going to very carefully pull off our masked moon. I'll bring my Misty back in. Throw my markers all over the desk. I need to order one of those pencil cases for my markers. So yeah, I used Artezas, I used a couple of Zigs, and I used these Chalkola markers. The Chalkola markers, I think, were $19.99 for this set of 26, and it came with a water brush pen, and they came with the pack of watercolor paper, which I will save the watercolor paper and use it for something mixed media, not necessarily for these markers, but I do like this storage case. That is pretty neat. Okay, so now, because everything was colored in, and I left this paper on my laminate on purpose so that I could shove this back into the corner in the right area. Just want to lift my moon up. And I actually put it in the trash because it was losing its adhesive properties. But I used that moon like 3 or 4 times. I'm just going to move my distress inks out of the way here. Okay, so now what am I going to do about my moon? It's got some ink in there. I'm not going to panic. I'm taking a shimmer pen, and the shimmer pen is going to reactivate some of that. See that? And I'm going to use it to my advantage. I'm going to give the moon a little bit of a shadow. Clean my shimmer pen off, and then go back in and fill in my moon. So now my moon has some shimmer. If I wanted to add some stars, I can just do that. You don't need very many. Also going to take a white Jelly Roll pen and add some stars. I used to go to stamp shows and buy every single white gel pen until I found one that didn't dry out. And I got to tell you, this wins. A white Jelly Roll .08. It's a wide point, and I store it in my container with the tip down, but I do not have any issues with these white gel pens. They're very opaque, and they always work. They never dry out. The other pen I like to add when I'm doing a simple night scene like this, and I don't do the flicking on this unless you're going to mask the whole area, because then it looks like snow, which is fine. You can do that, but I don't want it to look like snow. Oh, this is the Sakura Jelly Roll Sparkle Pen. And I like to use this because this has a lot of shimmer to it. And then I can add this in with the white. And it really stands out. Okay. So now we want to stamp again. So because we've put everything back in its place here, we're going to go back in with that archival ink and re-ink our stamp. Wow. Sometimes I'm like, did I make that? There we go. Pretty easy to do. So this one I just matted, but there you can see very similar night scenes. Now on this one I did put more detail in. I noticed that with the grass, so we can go in and do that. Ooh, that's that too bright green that I made the mistake of using the other night. I need a darker green. Sometimes you have to walk away from a project and come back to it in a day or two, because I know I did leave that one out and then came back a couple days later and penciled that grass, or colored the grass in. There we go. Okay, now we're done. Okay. So there you guys can see. There we go. So once again, let me know, guys, if you like the night scene. These are the two night scenes that I did using the same technique. And you can see here how I kept going over the trees to try to make them darker. I think they look much better the second time around. Or if you like the sunrise scene, this was using pan pastels. I just colored the whole thing in with pan pastels. But like I said, both methods used were to stamp in the stamp positioner, color in the images, and then go back and stamp them again. If you like this video, I appreciate your thumbs up. Please comment down below which one you like, the night scene or the sunrise scene. I will link everything for you. Thank you again to Blue Knight Rubber Stamps for sponsoring this. And again, the name of the stamp is called Campsite. I will link everything I used in the description for you. If you're new to my channel, welcome. I would love to have you as a subscriber. You're going to click on the button that's going to come over in the bottom right-hand corner here. And then click the bell and it will let you know every time I post a new video. As always, thanks for watching and keep on stamping. Bye-bye.